Hi, Jason Snell sitting in for Leo Laporte. This week on MacBreak Weekly, there's so much going on. We're going to read the Apple tea leaves, talk about Apple Kremlinology, a lot of news updates, including new update methods for macOS Sierra. And, Apple's building a lot of stuff around the world. It's under construction wherever they go. Ihnatko and Rene Ritchie are joining me next.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for MacBreak Weekly is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is MacBreak Weekly, episode 527, recorded Tuesday, October 4th, 2016. Double sticker probation.
MacBreak Weekly is brought to you by Gazelle, the online marketplace for buying and selling used gadgets. Shop from a variety of certified pre-owned electronics or trade one in for cash. Give new life to a used device at gazelle.com today. And by Squarespace. Squarespace is the simplest way to create a beautiful website. Plus, with a developer platform, you can customize the code behind any Squarespace design. Enter the offer code MacBreak and get 10% off. And by Casper, an online retailer of premium mattresses for a fraction of the price, because everyone deserves a great night's sleep. Get $50 off any mattress purchase by visiting casper.com/MacBreak and entering the promo code MacBreak.
Welcome back to MacBreak Weekly. I am Jason Snell, sitting in for Leo. You may know me from sixcolors.com, theincomparable.com, Relay FM. I get around. And I'm sitting in for Leo because Leo is, as yet, returning from his trip away. But don't feel like this is going to be an alien edition of MacBreak Weekly because we have two familiar faces to join us today. Of course, Andy Ihnatko from the Chicago Sun-Times. I wouldn't do MacBreak Weekly without him. Hi, Andy.
Is it okay if I start talking about a Hamilton musical and or a sci-fi movie I haven't seen until 83? It's kind of weird to be talking to you and not be talking about either of those two things.
I can't talk to Leo about Hamilton. I can't bring it up during a show because then Leo will talk about it for 15 minutes. And I feel bad for the viewers who probably don't care about Hamilton, but we'll see. We'll see where this episode goes.
It's muscle memory. I'm sorry.
Exactly. I know. It happens. We talk about that all the time on The Incomparable. Also here, of course, again, one of the hearts and souls of MacBreak Weekly, Rene Ritchie. Hi, Rene.
Hi, Jason. I'm not used to podcasting with you without a parking lot or some sort of outdoor scenery being in.
This is true.
Present.
Rene and I do a lot of podcasting outside of events. That's what we do. But here we are. Instead, I'm in the studio with your images on screens, as we like it.
Lovely screens.
So I thought we would start by talking about what I'd like to call Kremlinology Corner. You can have a K. You can spell that corner with a K if you really want to. And this is where we read the tea leaves. Rene's got his cup of tea there, so maybe he can look in the leaves and tell us what's going on. Lots of Apple Kremlinology going on. People love to detect what Apple's going to do based on small signals or things that don't actually exist sometimes. And we have a few items of Kremlinology, so I thought we would start there. There was a Mac Rumors report that cited some sources that says Apple is likely aiming for a late October launch of the redesigned MacBook Pro. You may remember this as the redesigned MacBook Pro that we thought might come at WWDC over the summer, and then that didn't happen. So we're looking for another time slot for it. And this is one of the rumblings out there. 9to5Mac also made a report that said that Apple, they noticed that Apple changed the time of its earnings call to October 25th due to a scheduling conflict. Now, that may mean Tim Cook has a dentist appointment that he just can't change, but it also may mean something about when they can be quiet and when they can announce new products that are regulations that go around the quarterly earnings reports. So, Andy and Rene, what do you think about this latest batch of Kremlinology? Is it Mactober? Will we finally get some new Macs at long last? Are we at the end of the desert?
Well, that the only real buzzword here is that all the rumors are that if there's a new MacBook, it's going to have this new OLED keycap screen, which would require support from developers, which is why everyone was expecting that to be announced at WWDC, so they could prime the pump. So it's possible that it was scheduled for earlier, and they had to put it off, and then now that they can only release it after they've given a few key developers chance to actually write software for it, so they'll have something out when it's out. If there's one hot button hardware issue in in the entire Mac community, the entire Apple community. It's that, where are my new Macs? I have a Mac that's 4 years old, and when I bought that, it still had the same case as the one I bought 8 years ago. So if Apple's feeling any pressure to roll out anything, they got to do something with the Mac soon, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me because as much as we feel this, Apple feels this pressure too, because they not only do they love the Mac, but Apple retail loves selling the Mac. They love selling it through back to school season. They love selling it through the holiday season. Those are hugely profitable, hugely popular products for them. And of course, there are all these rumors that for the next generation of MacBook Pro, Apple isn't just spec bumping the MacBook Pro. Every Ultrabook looks like the MacBook Air now. Every high-end notebook essentially is similar to a MacBook Pro, and they don't really stand out, and they hate that. There's nothing they hate more than just being one of a bunch of similarly colored boxes. So every once in a while, they try to do something spectacular, and once in a while it works. Like the new Mac Pro was great at launch, has absolutely languished since then. But you hear things about OLED displays or beamforming microphones for Hey Siri or Hey Commissary, or things like Touch ID sensors, which would be really hard to secure on a Mac the way they are secured on iOS, because Apple doesn't control the whole silicon stack from an A series processor through to the keychain. So they probably need super tight integration with Intel and AMD. And the rumor is that is just keeps getting delayed and keeps getting delayed. If that is true, super frustrating, because Apple, again, has no control over those component parts. But either way, it's the computers now are fine, but if you're charging Apple prices, they have to just be the latest specs. I don't think there's any way around that.
It's awfully hard to charge full price for that Mac Pro now that it's been languishing for a couple of years. That's the thing. I feel so bad if somebody buys a Mac Pro today. It's like you're getting an old computer for full price. It's pretty rough. Now, what do you guys think about the idea of doing an Apple event? You know, when they had the town hall event in the spring, they said basically this will probably be the last time we'll do this, and we're going to move into our new campus. But at that time, I think we all thought that that they would have maybe these products at WWDC, and now that hasn't happened. Do you think we're going to get an event in October? And I'm also curious if you think it'll be a big event, or maybe they will bring Town Hall back out of mothballs one more time. Renee, what do you think?
I would love to see an event, because I believe that when Apple tries to do something different, they really need to explain it. We saw the battery case launch last year, and nobody understood it. Nobody understood it until the same tech journalists who panned it were forced to carry it around CES, because their other alternatives just weren't as good. And if Apple can't get up there and make their case, then people are going to look at it and go, yeah, OLED screen or whatever new features it has, and it'll land with a thud instead of a boom. So if they can, it absolutely behooves them. And we've been to those October events. They've had October Mac events not last year, but the year before.
I think
and the year
out of the
that.
last 4 years, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. The new iMac with Retina 5K display debuted there. It's a great venue for those sort of smaller Mac-centric events.
Andy, what about you? Event this month, you think?
If it's an OLED screen, then I think they kind of have to. Just like Renee said, so many times when Apple releases something, you can't just say, hey, look, we've got this new touch sensor, or hey, look, we've got this new 5K output. They really want to explain why they made the decision that they made. And I think there's no finer example of this than when they got rid of the headphone jack on the iPhone 7. Obviously, that's going to be a big event anyway when they release a new iPhone, but it's not enough for them to simply say in 2 lines of a press release or a statement on the website, we decided that we can make better space of this. And here's how we're making sure it's not going to affect you whatsoever. They really want to tell the story. Apple really is more than any other company. They're like storytellers, and every device they put out is another chapter in this character that they're building. And authors like to explain why they decided to kill off a certain character in issue 3 of an 8-issue miniseries.
Yeah, that's how I feel about the headphone jack, is that we all knew it was going to get removed, but we all wanted to hear what the story was going to be. Like,
were they going to be jerks about it, or were they going to be
We just forgot. I mean, we were going to make the phone. We knew we forgot something.
No.
Suddenly came out of the factory.
You ever been planning a wedding seating chart, and then, oh my God, we don't have a chair for the father of the bride. Oh, no.
We can fit him around that table. Just stick another chair in there and
we'll
do
rent
it.
an RV. He'll have his own little room.
I agree with you guys that the major new feature of a key product like the MacBook Pro is not something I think anyone wants to release by press release. I know this is a new Apple. I know they're trying a whole lot of new things. You could try in this day and age. I mean, they could do a live webcast that's just them right? Don't even invite anybody. They could do that if they wanted to.
Hi, Johnny. Hi, Phil.
I mean, there's so many things that they could do, but it feels like this is the perfect thing for a small scale event. People don't understand, who maybe aren't on the inside baseball like we are in terms of covering this stuff, that the iPhone, the presence of the iPhone, especially at an Apple event, makes it huge, because the iPhone is an incredibly popular product and incredibly popular worldwide. And I love the Mac. I'm not saying the Mac isn't a great product, but the interest in an event that's focused on the Mac is a lot less. The press interest, the streaming video interest in an event like that is a lot less than an iPhone event. So it would be a lot easier for them to do a Mac event, even perhaps at Town Hall on their campus, one last ride. But I feel like Andy said, you got to do the storytelling. You got to explain why this OLED touch bar exists. You've got to explain how Touch ID got integrated into the Mac and why that's the greatest thing ever that they can do that now. Okay. It's awfully suspicious, those features, Apple Pay and the watch unlock in Sierra. Those do feel like features that would perhaps be better served to some new hardware that has a Touch ID sensor built into it, don't you think?
Absolutely. Yeah. But then there's also another part of this. I think they realized that they also have another avenue for getting their word out. We've been seeing over the past couple of years them choosing a journalist or a media outlet that they've worked with in the past, that they know that they're a known quantity, they have a good relationship, and I'm going to tell this story to this one reporter, this one journalist, and then they're going to tell the story for us over the next 2,000, 3,000 words, which is not in any way manipulation or anything, but rather than speak to a room full of 500 people, they know that they can talk to one person, and then because that one person has the only microphone, at least for the first day or two, that can be just as an effective way of getting that story out as getting in something that involves setting up catering.
Yeah, it is. So far, what they've done is not do the full rollout that way, but do a lot of the details. So, like Matthew Panzarino at TechCrunch got the story about the 2 cameras and the portrait mode in the iPhone 7 Plus. Right, that was one that he did, and we've seen that from other sources too, where they picked somebody to sort of relay the behind the scenes story. But it's more like the icing on top of the cake of a product announcement, rather than being the whole thing. It would be, which is not to say they couldn't do it, but it feels like it's more likely that we'll go to that event, and the moment that they announce a product like this, we'll discover that there's a story there by somebody that's the behind the scenes of why they decided to do the OLED. Yeah, and somebody who's probably not us, why they decided to do that OLED display and what went into the design of it. And that'll come from Matthew Panzarino, maybe, or maybe it'll be Jim Dalrymple. I don't know. He knows people.
All in GIFs.
It could be, yeah, maybe, or maybe it'll be Christina Warren. I don't know. There are people, but that sounds like something that they'll do.
The flip side of it is that it is such a big effort even to do a town hall event that they decided not to do one last year. They did 4 or 5 products in a row at the September event just so they wouldn't logistically have to support a town hall event in October. So I'm sure they're looking at it and they're like, I wish we could have shipped this at WWDC. I wish we could have shipped this in September. But seriously, get Piano Bar out of mothballs, get that place cleaned up. Yeah, drink as much coffee as you need. We're doing this one more time, folks.
Yeah, I think that's going to be. And the good thing about it is, by doing a Mac event that is a Mac only event, for those of us who care about the Mac, I think it's really exciting that they might devote the bulk of a press event to the Mac and the MacBook Pro, sure, but all of these products, right? We would hope. What do you guys think about? Are we going to see an iMac speed bump? We've seen one last year. It's sort of going on that cycle. And what about the Mac Pro and the Mac Mini and the rumors about maybe a MacBook Air too?
It's the most glowing thing on the horizon for me is, what are they going to follow up the MacBook Nothing with? Because that was clearly a device that we like to see Apple make, which is, this is the device we want to make. We're not sure if there's a market for it yet, but boy, are we excited about the manufacturing technique of this. Boy, are we excited about making a system board that is about as little as a USB thumb drive. And then remember that after they did that with the first MacBook Air, a year or two later, they said, okay, and now here's one that you would actually want to use, or at least that's more mainstream. So I'm really excited to see what they would do with that. Although speed bumps everywhere else would be really great. I really want to see, we've seen chapter 1 of the MacBook Nothing. I really want to see them develop that story.
Yeah, the adjectiveless MacBook, as I like to call it, that didn't catch on. I don't know why, but it did get an update in the spring. It's actually the most up-to-date Mac that exists. So I do wonder if it's on a different time frame and that we might not see anything there until the next year.
Like a second USB-C port.
Yeah, imagine there's the headphone jack. They could take that right off and put one right there. Oh boy, can you
But they're
imagine?
more likely to take away your one USB-C port than they are to give you a second one.
The good news is that the new version gets over 30 hours of battery life. The bad news is that it's a one-use battery and it's non-replaceable.
Just take it
You
back to
charge
the
it on
store.
your hot plate. Every dorm room should
It's the most recyclable MacBook ever.
Rene, what do you think about this rumor? There's a rumor out there, and it's a little bit hazy, but it's the idea that there may be a 13-inch laptop update, and whether it's a new version of the adjectiveless MacBook or whether it is a sort of back from the dead MacBook Air that potentially could have USB-C ports or a Retina display. What's your read on that rumor? Because that's an interesting and weird one where we don't seem to have a lot of detail, but it sounds like there might be some product out there that we don't know about yet.
Yeah, I think the original rumor was that the MacBook is going to replace the MacBook Air. And then sort of anyone who looked at the MacBook Air replacing the original MacBook, this is sort of the revenge of that. The MacBook is back. And you have it at two sizes because that seems to be the scale Apple believes they can address the most consumer demands for. So you have one at 12 inches, one at 13 point something, which is essentially 14 inches. And then people can choose between the two. And the first one, I mean, the 12-inch gets this rumor of being this nickname being the manager book because like it's great to carry around to meetings and take on planes, but it's just not good for anyone who codes for a living or does intense video work for a living. It really is, sort of that executive product. And the 14-inch would be similar to that, I think. It doesn't solve the same problem that the MacBook Air does, which is I can buy a Mac for $900 or $1,000. And until that dynamic changes, it's going to just be those sort of Apple's Lamborghini product there. Look to the future product that'll eventually trickle down to normal sizes and prices.
I mean, the other problem with the adjectiveless MacBook is that it's just not, without the fan, it just doesn't have, they've got the Core M processors in there and they're okay,
Yes.
but they're not the power that you can get even in a MacBook Air. The MacBook Air
the
can
M3
have an
is
i7
terrible.
in there, right? So,
Yeah.
so you've got this weird kind of tweener product, but this is why the MacBook Air still exists. It's $999. That's one reason it exists. And also it provides a level of speed that otherwise you need to go all the way up to the MacBook Pro to buy. So I'm kind of intrigued by the idea that there might be a MacBook Air revival a little bit, especially if it also had a Retina display, but certainly if they brushed it up and kept it around a little bit more. It does seem a little weird. It seemed logical that it would go away and the MacBook would just sort of be its replacement, but that may not be the case. I don't know.
My wondering is that maybe they're decided that the MacBook Air line is going to be their Intel-based super portable Mac portable line, and the MacBook Nothing is going to be the ARM-based Macintosh line. He said, making sure he points out that I have no information that Apple has firm plans about switching the platform over to ARM at any point. But when you open up the MacBook Nothing and take a look inside it, every decision seemed to have been made, to my eye, to creating a Mac that could run on an ARM processor very, very easily. Just looking at the size of that logic board, just looking at the way that it handles heat, just looking at the ways that it's maximized for battery, and pretty much to fit more battery in there at the expense of pretty much everything else. If they have that 5-year plan on the whiteboard, and they know that at one point in this choose your own adventure story, Apple starts to transition the low power version of the Macs into ARM, this is exactly what they would do. And if they want to be really clear about what they're doing, they could keep all the tooling, they could keep all the engineering that they have in the MacBook Air, and then divert everything they need to do to make ARM-based MacBooks into this brand new platform they've created that's designed to be as similar to a iPad as they can probably make it.
Yeah, I mean, there also is the thought out there that they might partner with Intel and make a custom Intel processor, which is another intriguing idea. I guess we'll see. There's a lot of, again, it's Kremlinology Corner with a K, so anything is possible. I wanted to bring up
we're not talking about the iPhone 8, so people are, it's hard to...
Wait for it.
Yet.
Wait for it. Don't know the spoilers. Kremlinology Corner has a special area for the iPhone 8 that we'll get to, but I want to ask about...
I was too busy airbrushing out people standing next to Stalin.
That's true. That's true. Where was Phil Schiller when he wasn't on stage? The Mac Rumors had a story about a report that, since we're talking Kremlinology, about iPad Pros, new iPad Pros next year. And this is an interesting story because they suggest a new 12.9 model. Okay, fair enough. A 10.1-inch model, so a little bit larger than the existing 9.7, and a 7.9-inch iPad Pro, which essentially is what if the iPad Mini was called an iPad Pro, and that they would all be available next spring, which makes sense from a timing perspective because that seems to be iPad time now, is the spring. And there are a lot of rumors about the idea that there'll be an iOS update in that time frame that would add iPad features, and that they're sort of uncoupling the iOS development so that iPhone stuff can happen in the fall and then some iPad stuff can happen in the spring. Renee, what do you think about this prospect of multiplying iPad Pros and a larger mid-range iPad Pro?
It makes me feel like The Incredibles. If all iPads are Pro, then none of them are Pro. They're just iPads again. And I really can't wait to see the 7.9-inch smart keyboard. I think that's just going to be Apple's best keyboard ever. But that aside, I think it makes sense that those features, if they're going to keep the 7.9-inch iPad around, it makes sense that all those features go across the line. That we have True Tone across the line. That we have the at least 8-megapixel camera across the line. Because right now, you have concessions no matter which of those devices you buy. Right. USB 3 is Apple's only iOS device with USB 3 is still the 12.9-inch 12.9-inch iPad Pro. 10.1 is interesting. If it's just another 4:3 aspect ratio, it's not as interesting. If Apple starts experimenting with a 4K display in 16:9, maybe that is more interesting. I don't know, but it seems that 3 sizes is probably a good idea. 4 sizes, I'd like to hear them make the case for.
Yeah, I do wonder if there's a bezel reduction story going on there too, where the 10.1 might not actually be that much bigger, but with a much smaller bezel. I don't know. You need a bezel to hold on to the iPad.
Where do you hold it from the bottom?
Yeah, I don't know. You get a clamp, and you just I don't even know. What do you think, Andy? I mean, I was surprised by the small the iPad Mini. We were wondering, like, does the iPad Mini need to exist in a world where we've got the iPhone 7 Plus? And this story suggests perhaps it does. What do you think?
It's interesting. If Apple starts adding more sizes to the iPad line, I think it's mostly to figure out what size people really, really want. Remember that we had the original iPad for years, and we had to be a little bit surprised that sales maybe flattened out once smaller alternatives, both made by Apple and other companies, started coming out. It's not as though the 9.7-inch was the perfect size. It was the size that we all had. And now that I have my 12.9-inch iPad Pro, I absolutely adore it. I don't leave the house without it. So I think there's a lot of room for Apple to start thinking, okay, is the problem that we're not giving them the exact right size? Would we be selling more 12.9-inch, or rather top-of-the-line iPads if it were just a little bit smaller and easier to carry around? I personally think that there is plenty of room for an iPad Mini, because a tablet is a totally different beast from even a large-size phone. I do have an iPad Mini. You basically treat it as though it's the netbook version of my 12.9-inch iPad. But it also means that if I'm on the subway or someplace where I don't want to be that guy on the train or on the bus or whatever who's carrying this big lunch tray and looking at it, I want to be that guy who seems to be holding an ebook reader or a large phone and using it that way. So I think there's definitely room for a smaller iPad. And I agree with Renee. Obviously, it's a big get for them to make sure that as much of the Apple line as possible supports that wide color gamut, because you're not going to be able to fully appreciate the pictures that you're taking on this brilliant new iPhone 7 if you have an older screen that still is stuck with the sRGB color range. So Apple always tends to redefine what a product means as they try to figure out what people are actually buying. I would tend to think that more models means that three iPads are going on into the product line. 2 of them are going to be staying, and we'll find out which one wasn't selling when one of them is quietly discontinued.
Now that's criminology right there. It's just we'll airbrush that model out and we'll never know about it.
Who is next to Yuri Andropov?
Yes, Jenny.
Renee made a great point that I think people who aren't close iPad watchers may not realize, but the iPad line right now is really weird because the 12.9 and the 10.1 have different features. Like 10.1 has True Tone and it has the wide color gamut, and the 12.9 has the rapid USB-C charging and USB 3. And so it's like, how do you decide? You can't walk in, Mr. Moneybags can't walk into a store and say, give me your finest iPad, because there are a few. And I would hope.
There's not even a rose gold 12.9, Jason. I mean, what kind of world do we live in?
It's savagery. It's madness. So I think that's what I'm saying is if nothing else in the spring, it would be nice to see the iPad line sync up so that we all know that the top top of the line iPads all behave the same, because right now they it's all over the place. And I look at this iPad Pro that I've got here, and I love it. Like Andy, I love the large iPad Pro, but it doesn't have a bunch of features that the 9.7 has, and that's weird. It's just weird. Okay.
And not into now you're making me think about all these things. If we do have the October event and the March event, 2 years ago, the October event was the iPad Air 2, I think, and the iMac with the 5K display. Last year, no October event, but then we had the update to the DCI P3 iMac that was just basically a press release and some briefings. Then this year, do we get an update to that iMac? What is it? Is it just a spec bump because Intel stopped making the chips for the 21.5 inch? What do they do with that? And then if they update the iMac now, what gets updated with the iPad in March? Is it just iPads? Is it an iPad only event? New watch bands? Are there Macs that they didn't announce now? Like, does the Mac Mini and the Mac Pro have to wait till March? I don't know, Jason. It's so up in the air right now.
And Apple doesn't, and they hate this, Apple doesn't control their own destiny here, right? With the Intel stuff, Intel's delays affect Apple's business, and I think we all sort of think that Apple thought it could get away with skipping a product generation for Intel, and then the delays hit, and now they're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. So I know they hate that. That more than anything else, that lends credence to people suggesting, in my mind, to the ideas that Apple would take the whether it's an ARM chip or whether it's making a deal with Intel for some custom silicon that Apple gets to control but is still Intel compatible, something so that they can control their own destiny a little bit more instead of waiting for Intel to supply them, because they hate that. That is the number one thing that it goes against Apple's culture, is that they build these products and then they wait for somebody else and they're fully dependent on them to make their products happen.
Yeah, it's really difficult because... I'm sorry, go ahead, Rene.
I was going to say we want them on time, but then we have to listen to Paul Theroux talk about his Surface Book not burning up his laptop bag. So
exactly, it's
like there's no win.
Definitely not. Can we do before we wrap the Kremlinology corner and cast it back into the ash heap of history, I wanted to give the obligatory iPhone 8 rumor story a whirl. Bloomberg reporting that Sharp is in talks with Apple for OLED screens for new iPhones. OLED screens, of course, if you've got an Apple Watch, you've got an OLED screen on your wrist right now. Lower power, vibrant colors, not as easy to see in bright sunlight necessarily, although Apple's working hard on that with the Apple Watch Series 2. Any thoughts about OLED and moving to OLED for the iPhone? Andy, you've used a lot of Android phones. What's your take on OLED as a smartphone screen?
It creates beautiful images. And the usual complaint about OLED is that, well, of course, it looks beautiful just because you've artificially increased the contrast, you've artificially increased the saturation. But as I usually say, that's why burgers at McDonald's have lots of salt and fat. People like that. But it also means that when you're using applications that use colors as a part of the user interface, they just pop. They really look beautiful. So if Apple could create their own interpretation of OLED, where it is still color accurate, you're not seeing something that is artificially good, I think it would be a very, very good deal for everybody, especially now that Apple seems to be slightly easing off their mandate that all iOS features must be as bleak as possible. If there is color in the interface, it means you're wasting people's joy, and the source of joy should only be the things that we design. Some shades of gray are partially acceptable on a case-by-case basis.
So the iPhone 7 seal is what you're saying.
The
and 7
little
seal
burner
plus
wants to iPad.
Yeah, sure.
It's super interesting to me because there's also rumors that Apple is doing a lot more display technology on their own side, and you never know. They have like the A series, the S series, the W series, now the M series. There's a lot of letters left in that alphabet, and that's a really good, like, their hardware platform technologies team is amazing. So you never know what's going to spring out of Apple itself, especially when they work with partners. OLED is a really, really good technology for a lot of things. But, Tim Cook has said before, Apple chose not to use it earlier because it did have compromises. And when you look at some of the earlier Android phones, you see like pentile displays, which had a lot of baggage with them, or you saw very low lifespans on some of the colors, like blue especially. And some people were exploring quantum dot as a way to get some of the benefits of OLED without getting some of the drawbacks. And it's in flux right now. And one of the biggest indicators is that 3D Touch, which is a marquee feature for Apple, is currently bound to an LED backlight, something an OLED display does not have. And that's not to say Apple can't re-engineer it, but Apple chose to release a phone just last year that is dependent on LED. So I would expect that Apple would move on to a new display technology eventually, just because LCD, they've got the best LCD panels in the world, but there are limits. They're hitting the end of what LCD can do for them. Whether they go to OLED and they do it in an Apple way, or they do go to something like quantum dot, I think that'll be one of the next big screen technologies leaps they make.
Whether it's in an iPhone 8 or not. That's interesting stuff. Yeah, OLED, it is pretty. And they have done some work, like Apple Watch Series 2. It's so much brighter on that OLED screen.
1,000 nits.
Yeah, the nits.
Of them.
Let's not count nits. Let's not pick nits, Rene. Okay, I'm going to close up Kremlinology Corner, and I think it's time for us to hear wise words about good friends of ours from Leo Laporte beaming in from the past.
We'll be back to MacBreak Weekly, more with the guys in just a bit. But first, a word from Gazelle. Great time. You're looking, I know. Maybe you're looking at a new iPhone. New iPads might be coming any day now, right? We're thinking an October event. Well, here's the deal. Sell your old device to Gazelle. Now, here's the beauty part. You don't know if you want the new iPad yet. Don't worry. Because all you do is you go to Gazelle, you get a quote, and that quote's guaranteed for 30 days. So that gets you right into November, okay? Which means you'll have plenty of time to see if you want it, choose it, order it, get it, transfer your data off, and then once you're ready to go, you press send, and Gazelle will ship you a box with prepaid mailing, so you pay nothing to ship it. You put the iPad in. In fact, while you're at it, why don't you go and get a bunch of other stuff, get all the gadgets you got, all the gizmos, and put them in the box, and you're going to get cash. You can get a check, you can get a PayPal credit, you can get, if you like Amazon, if you use Amazon a lot, which I do, I always get the Amazon gift card because they bump that up 5%. So you get even a better deal. So, as we know, to review, class, Gazelle, a great place to sell your old gadgets. Don't just throw them in the drawer. That's silly. There's money in those gadgets. Trade them in at Gazelle. And then they now sell the best stuff they've got back if you want. So if you're looking to replace a phone or you're looking to save money, this is a great time, for instance, to buy the iPhone 6S or 6S Plus. Lots of availability, lots of choice in color quality for every carrier, and you get a great deal. So if you're saying, oh, I want it just like it's new, you can do that. But if you want it, I don't mind a little gentle signs of use, you can do that and save even more money. But never fear, every single device that's sold by Gazelle is rigorously checked. They have a 30-point check that includes not just functionality, but things like scratches and stuff. They really make sure that that phone is in tip-top, or tablet, because they sell iPhones, 6Ss, 6S Pluses, iPads, and even Samsung Galaxy phones. Maybe get a Galaxy phone to replace your Note 7 temporarily and then sell it back to Gazelle, right? Isn't that smart? You could do that. Everything is guaranteed to work. You have a 30-day return policy. They're not sold with a carrier contract, but they do work with all the existing carriers, so that's nice. And if you want, you can get financing as you check out, financing by a firm. You just give them some basic information. Your approval will be instant, and then you're done. You can also get a 12-month warranty at checkout, which covers not just the hardware defects or software, but it covers water damage, cracked screens, the whole kit and caboodle. A 12-month warranty for cell phones and iPads. That's from Assurance Solutions. So Gazelle really is, they're just getting better and better. They're really improving their services, the turnaround time, the quality, and the variety. I just love Gazelle. You will too. Check it out. What do you got to lose? Gazelle, Gazelle.com to buy or sell. It's got to be Gazelle. Now back to MacBreak Weekly.
Thank you, past Leo. Your words have touched us. Let's go on to the news. How about that? Sounds good. Enough Kremlinology for now. Let's go into some other news headlines that I think might be kind of interesting. So something that happened yesterday, Rene, you wrote about this at iMore. Apple has changed how it handles downloading OS updates for the big versions, the big installer versions that it used to be one way, and now it's going to be another way. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, sure. So previously, a while ago, Apple moved how you update, the way that you update OS 10 now macOS, to the Mac App Store. And what would happen is you'd get an alert that an update was available. You'd press the little button to update, and then you sit there and wait, and it would suck down however many gigabytes it would need to suck down. And depending on the speed of your connection, that could be, fairly fast, or it could be come back after a long day at work and hope that it's probably done. For apps, they've had this thing called background download, where if you enabled it, and for a lot of people it probably was enabled by default, but you have that choice in preferences. If you enabled it, it would be pinged that an update was ready. It would download the update, not install it. They never want to install anything without your permission, but it would go through and just allow you to quickly update everything. I should correct that. For app updates, you can automatically have them installed, but for system updates, they wanted to make sure that you were aware, so it wouldn't like reboot in the middle of you doing a podcast. So what they've done now is That's
nice. Good of them to do that.
We both have had experiences with other platforms where it would reboot in the middle of a podcast. Mm-hmm. Not the best experience. So what they've done now is they've given the same background download capability to the installer for for Mac OS Sierra. So if you're running the latest versions of El Capitan, either the absolute latest version or the previous version, you'll get this ability. You'll see the update pop up, and you'll go to install it, and you'll find that beautifully, miraculously, it's already been downloaded. You just press a button and it starts to install. They are being conscientious, though, for people who may be on limited storage. And if you try to save something and your Mac is on limited space, it'll just ditch that installer quietly in the background, freeing up a gigabyte or two of space that you can use, maybe 3 gigabytes depending on your system, that you can use to download stuff or to save stuff in the meantime. Then it'll just go back to downloading it again when you have enough space. So it's more of this sort of background intelligent management stuff. And for most people, I think it'll just be a no-brainer. It's just easier to do, but they are giving options for people who want to forbid it on their system, for example.
It sounds like this is the perfect sort of feature if you're somebody who doesn't have a metered connection and has plenty of bandwidth and isn't worried about it, because then you get the instant gratification. Essentially, it's, hey, did you know that Sierra's here? And then you can install it right then and not sort of say, sure, and then an unspecified amount of time later, it will throw up a little dialog box and say, now would you like to install this new operating system? It lets you do it in a moment. And if you're on metered, or you're worried about your download ruining your podcast or whatever it is, then you can go into system preferences, into the App Store preferences in system preferences, and turn it off, and it won't auto download anything if you want.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it's a great system, I think, for most people. If you do have concerns, or if you're on a production system that you never want to upgrade, that you're still running Tiger on, you absolutely will not be affected by this. But it's one of those things that's nice. It's getting the management of the computer out of the way from people who just want to use it.
And Apple benefits here because it makes it that much easier for everybody to get on Sierra, which is what they always want everybody on the latest OS version. And so now you don't have that moment of like, well, I don't want to bother right now. Instead, it's sort of like we can do it right this moment. You don't have to wait. It's sort of like how iOS, tvOS have been working for a while now. Right, and there is, to be clear, just like with iOS and tvOS, they will ask you, and you have to go through the installation steps. It's not going to do something in the background and shock you. They'll ask permission before they do anything like upgrade your software.
Yep,
it's only polite.
True things.
So another story came out in the last week, since the last edition of MacBreak Weekly, which was about Apple and metadata in iMessage. Now, there are a couple things here. The Intercept, Sam Biddle, you may remember him from Valleywag and other Gawker websites. Now at The Intercept wrote this story that is lots of capital letters in the headline saying Apple logs your iMessage contacts and may share them with police, which is...
Yeah, it's a really bad story.
That's a scary headline. And then there on iMore, Rene wrote a less scary headline called Apple and Metadata, What You Need to Know. So, Rene, what's going on here, and what do iMessage users need to know about what of their metadata is getting logged and what that data is, what that information is?
Yeah, sure. So what happened was iMessage came out, and what Apple did is to make it easier for everybody to use and to get really good adoption, they mixed it into the SMS app, and the SMS app became Messages, and it lets you handle SMS, which is the green bubbles, and iMessage, which is the blue bubbles, pretty seamlessly. You just type in the person's phone number, and in the background, Apple figures out if they're on iMessage or not, and if they are, blue bubble goes, and if they're not, the green bubble goes, and you really don't have to worry about much more than that. But as a consequence, what happened, a year later, some people switched to Android and found out they just weren't getting getting their messages because they're friends with iOS devices like iPads or iPhones. We're trying to message them, but that message was, Apple still thought they were in the iMessage system. They were no longer, but that message just didn't get sent over SMS anymore. So a bunch of Apple engineers got together and tried to debug the problem. And they did that by creating a log, and they keep only 30 days because they really only need current information. What happened a month ago is of no help to them in problem solving this. And as there turns out, there are other problems with iMessage as well. So anyone who's done group messages, for example, Apple's security model is very, very tight. And if you switch devices, if you go from an iPhone to an iPad, for example, you can have either a phone number or an Apple ID, an email address associated with iMessage. So if Jason and I are on the iPhone and then Jason goes home and messages me from his iPad, I might not have Jason's email address. And then it really doesn't, like it sort of knows it's from the same contact, but it can't really be sure. And so it splits into a new conversation because that's Apple's security model. Or if Andy's on his iPad and messages me and then goes out and starts using his Android phone, and that's coming from a text message and it's part of a group conversation, again, it breaks because it really can't tell if that's the same secure conversation anymore. And there's all these sort of issues that they believed on an engineering level, nothing to do with lawyers, nothing to do with compliance, nothing to do with law enforcement, that they just needed this information to properly debug the problems in iMessage, problems which persist to this very day. And that's the story with this. But unfortunately, anything that exists can be subpoenaed. So if there's a court order saying we want all your data, all your metadata, if this is sitting on a server, even a development server, Apple is obligated to hand it over to them. For me, this is an interesting story, but the bigger story is that how do you do bug fixing and how do you do logging in an era where anything could be subpoenaed? How do you balance the privacy of your readers? And metadata is not the data. The data of the messages is still end-to-end encrypted. Nobody has any idea what's in these messages. This is data like what time you're sending it, what IP address you're sending it from, the contact negotiation that's happening that Apple's trying to determine if it's an iMessage or an SMS, that kind of stuff. But how do you log any of these things in an environment where anything that you log might be subject to search and seizure?
Isn't this a tremendous problem for Apple's engineers? You're really saying, and for any Silicon Valley company engineer is saying, you are balancing user experience with security at every stage, that if you collect information, it can be subpoenaed. And if you need to collect information to make a feature better, you have to immediately ask yourself, could that be subpoenaed? Because it's not as if Apple's creating a trove of information here to do anything other than improve connectivity between devices. But the fact is, like you said, you write the information down and it's subpoenable. At that moment, it is now part of a potential security story.
And a couple of the InfoSec writers who I follow were saying that, it's not just that at any time the government could compel Apple to collect this information whether they need it or not, because they realize that, metadata exists everywhere. Carriers are famous for collecting and storing metadata about all the text messages that we send. Mm-hmm. And just that information exists, they can be compelled to collect it. So I think the actual story about Apple collecting it is a non-story, but I think the issue that it raises is huge.
Andy, what do you think?
We all need to remember that the most ambitious and far-reaching organization collecting personal information is not Google. And the technology they have for correlating little pieces of information is also not Google having the best solutions there. And the tiniest piece of data that you have combined with 10 other pieces of data puts together a really convincing picture that you could not get even if you just had full access to somebody's iMessage stream. So this is why I hope that when Apple keeps banging the drum about security, they stop making it about other companies here in Silicon Valley don't have the same attitude that we do, because it's not the big problem isn't necessarily Facebook or Google. It's your local supermarket and it's your bank and it is pretty much everybody else you transact with. And it's really inexpensive devices that can be installed in the back in the part of the back deck equipment in police cars, so that simply by virtue of this car driving around on its normal business, it is collecting every single license plate that is near that car day after day, week after week, month after month. We really do have to have an awareness. It really is like the movie They Live, where it's not until you put those glasses on that you realize, oh my God, I'm leaking out personal information everywhere. I need to get in a fight with Roddy Piper now, or something of that nature. So so when you see an article like that says, oh, well, Apple talks a big game about being secure, but really all this data, yeah, again, that's true of pretty much everywhere, and Apple definitely needs to get credit for taking it more seriously than most companies do.
But it still bites. I mean, when you say we care about security, this is the challenge: is that any story like this is going to be used as an example of a shocking realization that Apple isn't completely locked down with everything, which is impossible. But Apple's the one who sort of set themselves up as a company that is all about your security and privacy, and so they do open themselves up to criticism with stories like this. Even though, again, you could be incredibly private and secure, and that product. At the extreme, that product's not a product that anyone's going to want to use. And so how do you balance all of those things?
I mean, radiation is hard. You can have all the curtains closed in your house and they can still use an infrared camera and see you. And everything that we do, whether it's digital or analog, has radiation around it. It has stuff that's streaming off of it. I like Sam. I think he's a gifted writer. But my issue, I don't really care about the Apple part of it. I mean, that to me is an interesting technical thing. But like my mom watches BBC and these stories come on and they're designed to scare the hell out of her because Apple gets a lot of attention. So if you put Apple and something scary in the headline, the headline is going to get a lot of attention. The story will get a lot of attention. And that's totally not fair to her when there's some obscure jailbreak if you use a Chinese app store and the headline is Apple security cracked for the first time ever or something. Or, Apple's collecting logging information to debug iMessage. And the story is Apple is collecting information and giving it to that is totally not fair to the reader. And I think at that point is when you've actually broken faith. And it's better to sort of frame the story in its actual context rather than just using it as a way to collect attention.
So I got another story here. This is talk about Apple's bread and butter, which is rapid operating system updates. We talked about the Sierra updater and making that easier. This is a story posted on Apple Insider. It's information from Mixpanel research firm tracking iOS 10 adoption. And one of the things that it says is we've crossed over. We've reached the crossover point already. It's been only a few weeks, 2 weeks of availability, and there are now more devices running iOS 10 than iOS 9. Apple does this fast. This is one of their trademarks, but it's also a huge benefit for the platform, right? That you can have confidence if you're a third-party developer, for example, that people are going to be on, if not the latest version, but the latest version and maybe one version back. That the uptake is so incredibly fast with Apple products.
Yeah, and that's part of that is due to the consistency of the platform, where you don't have you have one kind of smartphone, and it's the ultra sophisticated, ultra high-end smartphone. They're not selling iPhones in bubble packs to parts of the country parts of the world where they don't have a lot of money for phones. So it's easy to really get everybody on the same page, and that's why the level of software is so consistently high.
Yeah, and I think it goes both ways too. That Apple is doing two things with the updates. One is when they push these out, it goes to every person and every carrier in every region of the world, which is not the case with a lot of platforms because they have that non-integrated model and they have to negotiate carriers and device manufacturers and sometimes laws in individual states, and all that stuff can vary. But it also means that when you buy an Apple device, you're not just buying the device you have now. And we just spoke about it with iOS 10. Last year, iOS 9.3 was a really good update, especially for iPad. It had a bunch of interesting new features in it. iOS 10.3 could be the same thing, and you'll just get it, and you'll be almost certain to get it if you're running anything approaching. Apple's supporting devices going back to 2012, I think, the iPhone 5 right now, which is not the case even with the Nexus made in the same year. And yeah, both have advantages and disadvantages, but when it comes to updates, it's a huge advantage and a huge added value, and it's especially prevalent in security updates. And if you listen to Security Now, which follows this show, Steve Gibson, hi, you'll hear every week there's iOS problems and there's Android problems. And the iOS problems, Apple has been much better than the past. They'll push out a point update, and within 2 weeks, hundreds of millions of people have that update. And that's, again, it's not going to matter to everybody, but for the people for whom updates and security fixes are important, it's something that you really have to factor into your decision making.
Let's talk about some levity. I want to bring some levity to this. We've been talking about security holes and things like that. It's really depressing. Number one, top paid sticker pack app. I love the messages stickers. I love them. I made one. Stickergate. Wait, we already had a Stickergate. It was why Apple doesn't put Intel Inside stickers on its laptops. That was Stickergate. This is like Stickergate 2, Electric Boogaloo, Electric Sticker. Anyway, we'll come up with a name for it.
Apple has proven to have a consistent problem against stickers. I promise to investigate.
The story here is that there is an app that makes such a great idea. It's stickers that look like iMessage responses, and the idea is that when you get phonies, as it's called, you can take a sticker and basically put words in the mouth of the person that you're talking to. And it's a pretty fun joke. So somebody says, I don't know what you're talking about, and you put on a sticker that says, "You're so smart." And it looks now to that person like they responded with something totally different than what they actually responded to. Now, this is playful and adorable, but it also is using Apple's system font and Apple's design for the bubbles. And apparently, Apple has warned the makers of this sticker pack that they need to change their stickers to not exactly resemble iMessage stickers.
You just know that Eddie Q is doing this to Phil Schiller and all the group messages with Tim Cook and Jeff Williams. It's like Phil would make a point, Eddie would just put the bubble on top of it. Phil would put an angry face, Eddie would stick the happy face emoji sticker on top, and just they were getting angrier and angrier, and something had to be done about it.
Duke stinks.
How dare you?
That is an interesting theory. See, all the theories of that App Store rejections and other things that we've had over the years.
To the Kremlin now?
I really enjoy the idea that App Store rejections may happen because one Apple executive is just using apps to annoy another Apple executive, and they won't have it anymore.
Come on, Phil. It's just good fun. Take it down.
The only way to get Phil Schiller to stop using that fart app during meetings is to destroy all fart apps.
So
you made lasers, now take this.
Renee, I know there's an iMore sticker pack. I did an incomparable sticker pack. I think the real question here is, Andy, when is the Andy Ihnatko sticker pack coming to the Messages App Store? Please.
Jason, I'm glad you asked. Here at Ihnatko, every time we say no, it's as important as every time we say yes. We feel as though this is an interesting space and emerging technology, but we're not going to produce a sticker pack just to simply say that we have the same thing that other platforms have. Here at Ihnatko, we will be sure to address this when we feel as though we can bring something to this technology so that we can honestly say it's the best sticker pack ever made. And now I have a video here.
Is there a release date? That's the question.
We don't comment on unannounced stickers.
Oh,
later this fall.
Interesting. Well, I look forward to the Ihnatko sticker pack whenever it arrives. Any thoughts about the story? I think it's funny and ridiculous, and I get why. Apparently, the statement that was made to the developer was no pranks in the App Store. It's like the dean came in and said, now I'm gonna send you to detention if you don't stop it with your wacky pranks. But I don't know. It seems all in fun and goofy to me. And
Apple just sees the lawsuits. They see someone doing this to someone else, they're getting hit with a can of beer, and then they get sued.
That's again, this is what the dean warned us about in every college party movie ever made.
It's a real genius episode. Should have been filmed.
Interesting. Interesting.
But it's good. But it's good that it made it to the App Store to begin with. Apple gets some flack for saying, "Hey, wait a minute, how come you let it into the App Store to begin with?" I do think they have the policy of, we will make sure that our validation process is inclined towards letting apps in, but then that means that when we take a closer look at something, or once again, it turns out that it's only Tim Cook and one other senior employee at a meeting because everybody else got, oh, I'm sorry, I can't make that, I'm canceling. Nobody show up at the restaurant stickers inside Apple. It's I'd like to see them not actually say no pranks. Remember, this is the no fun platform. We let you have an off shade of green in the user interface. Don't make us sorry that we entrusted you with frivolity.
It's funny though, because they have an unforeseen category, which is supposed to cover everything that they're not predicting, and they have fairly good guidelines in their head, but they always know that something will happen that they never accounted for. And especially during launch time, when everyone is trying to get like their iOS 8 or iOS 9 or iOS 10 app approved into the store, it's all hands on deck, and they're running things through. And basically, if they don't crash and they're not obviously like porn or something, they'll have a high likelihood of making it through, just because there's such a deluge of apps. And then over time, especially if they become super popular, the people who actually are running the review teams will stop and look and say, wait a minute, we know this got in, but it really doesn't follow our rules. And then the people who run the store will say, hey, we're making money off this, leave us alone. And there'll be a huge argument, and eventually somebody will win. And in some cases, friend of the show, James Thompson, gets caught in the middle. And Apple sincerely believes that there's no coder in the world who can make make a widget robust enough to have a whole app inside it. So they just say don't do it, and then hey, I made the dock, I can do this, and it works. And there's a huge brouhaha, but we get actual apps and widgets faster than if we had to wait a year for iOS 10 to make them official. So it's a terrible, horrible process, but sometimes it produces faster results.
And I'd like to thank the Twitch chat room. They're brilliant. They just pointed out that what the dean would do is put that app developer on double sticker probation. So, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, my. The jokes, they happen. So one more news item that I wanted to share with you guys. And Andy, I'm really curious about this because I know that you are not a stranger to Android Wear smartwatches. And there was a report on androidpolice.com. That's a fine mobile-related site about Android Wear smartwatches not pairing with the iPhone 7, and that Google is apparently aware of the issue, but awareness is not enough. We also need to know what's going on here. What do you think? Do you use an Android Wear smartwatch with an iPhone, or do you keep those sort of dogs and cats separate?
I only have it paired with my Android phone because, unfortunately, so it's only last year that Android Wear got opened up to iOS, and even there, you don't really get an Android Wear or an Apple Watch type experience. You get notifications, of course, from all apps. You'll find out who's calling and what your text messages. But the only apps that directly support it are Google apps because really it's the only platform they can control. And now we're seeing the bang-on effects where you have something that has to be intimate with a watch. With a phone, but you don't have an intimate correspondence with the makers of that phone. It is a big deal for people who are using these watches because you look at the list of incompatible watches, and it's basically any Android Wear watch that has sold more than 8. Including my favorite, including what I think is the best, I would say the best smartwatch made, which is the Moto 360 second generation one. So essentially that means that it's the door is closed now. It's basically a rechargeable timepiece, and that's it. It's too bad. I'm sure that it's nothing more than what it seems. It's just an incompatibility with the new software. I'm sure that I don't know if Google is going to be really rushing to fix this because once again they have better numbers than we do, and the numbers we have are that there are very, very few people are actually running Android Wear on iOS. But it does show that it's one of the nasty things about smartwatches these days is that you really are connected to. It has to be the maker of the watch makes your phone. If it doesn't, then you're either stuck with something like a fitness watch or something else that has a very limited functionality.
It's like those early episodes in the original Star Trek when the Enterprise disappeared and the shuttle was just stuck out there in space, hoping and praying that the Enterprise would come back and find it. And Android Wear, I mean, Google famously last week also delayed Android Wear, the next version, until next year. Yeah, Android Wear 2. And it just goes to show watches are not easy. I mean, it's easy to sit here and criticize and say they're not selling that many or the software is not perfect yet. But the wrist computers is a whole new thing, and we're all sort of discovering it together.
Yeah, exactly right. And you're right. This is a little bit the Star Trek analogy, Rene, I think might be that if you're in a like a Klingon shuttlecraft, you may not be expecting a Federation ship to pick you up. And that's sort of like the mismatch here makes it that much weirder.
Or the other way around.
Yeah, or the other way around. That's right. Fair play. Fair play.
You're a space seed.
It's great that Android Wear, that Google made the effort to get Android Wear to work with iOS at all, but it is so limited, and the experience isn't nearly as rich as it is on Android, and so it feels like I love that they are making it as compatible as they can, but it's still got to be a tiny fraction of the actual use.
The good news is that one of the nicest features of Android Wear compared to Apple Watch, the custom watch faces. Those will still work as a wristwatch. So if you still have your rocket ship watch or the watch in which the kitty goes to sleep at night and wakes up in the morning, you'll still have your kitty.
That's right. The number one feature of any smartwatch, and I will fight somebody who says different, is it needs to tell the time, right? I mean, number one, please tell the time. Otherwise, you know what? You're not a watch. If you can't tell the time.
So because the iPhone was originally seriously a phone, and all the smartphones like the Trio and BlackBerry had hardware hang up and answer buttons because it was such a phone. And now the phone is sort of an app that annoys us as often as it pleases us. And I wonder if like 5 years from now, are we going to say, oh, it's a wrist computer that happens to have a watch app, but who looks at time anymore? My implant handles that, dude.
Who looks at time anymore? You're frightening me, Rene. You're with your bleak vision of a timeless future. How would it even be the future if there's no time anymore? I don't know. I think the difference here is that they called it a watch. I don't feel like a fitness band.
They called it a phone.
They
called the iPhone a phone.
Well, maybe bands and fitness bands are the right way to go then, because then there's no implied timekeeping.
Where's the band? I should play music then. I mean, like this whole branding thing is.
I thought it was an automatic garage door opener at the release event.
Interesting. Interesting idea. Well, okay. I hear something in the distance. Speaking of not recognizing what time is or what space is, what would it be like if Leo Laporte, who's not even here, suddenly appeared to tell us about one of our fine sponsors? Well, I think it would look a little bit like this.
More MacBreak Weekly coming up in just a little bit. Thank you for filling in for me, by the way, as I am on vacation, but I couldn't leave without telling you about Squarespace. They've been such a great supporter of Twit since practically the beginning. I mean, practically when Dane got out of college and Anthony got out of college and they started Squarespace and they created, Anthony created it because he wanted a blogging platform. But he's also a brilliant programmer. And he thought, I'm going to do and I've talked to him a lot about this. I'm just really impressed with what he's done. The server and the software, the content management system, kind of linked. So that way you get some real benefits. For instance, whenever you have a Squarespace site, if traffic starts to mount suddenly because, somebody mentions you on a radio show or something, Squarespace has the ability, because they're so tightly integrated, to ramp up very quickly to load balance, and it's all handled without any effort on your part. Security updates too, because they manage the software. They're making sure it's always secure. It's really the best stuff out there. I'm really happy to use it for my blog. It's leolaporte.com. Lisa wanted to, when we created our ad agency, Artisanal, Lisa wanted to have a website. She didn't want to spend time designing it and kind of remembers the pain that we went through at Twit designing and creating our own website and the cost. The nice thing about Squarespace, they have lots of really good independent developers who work on the Squarespace platform. We found one that was very affordable, is maintaining her site, made a beautiful site at artisanalagency.com. You can check it out. And you know what? I don't mind giving out those URLs, even though there's tens of thousands of you might hit it all at once. Squarespace never goes down. It's the best hosting plus the best software. Sites look great. It's both design and engineering, and every template has the top of the line, the best design out there and the best engineering. And you don't have to do any coding. It's really kind of, you could just frankly take a template, put content in and stop, and it's going to look great. But there are lots of customizable settings so that you could tweak it. They offer you hundreds of fonts, colors, page configurations. And what's nice is your content's separate from the template. So if you get tired one day, and you should do this every year or so, refresh your website, it's just a click of a mouse. It's easy. Now, if you want to get really geeky, they have a Squarespace developer platform, which gives you total control, but you start with the great engineering as a base. They have actually a blank template you can use that gives you the mobile responsive design and the e-commerce and all the hooks you need. And then you get full control over HTML, CSS, JavaScript. You get a JSON API so that you actually have your CMS has an API, a JSON API. You could start with a beautiful template, or you can use the basic template. Once you register as developer and you turn on the developer toggle, you can use SFTP. You can use Git. They support Git, which is great, and just start coding. That means you can put something up in development, test it, move it to production. I mean, it's all the stuff that a developer wants. Every site has mobile built in, mobile responsive. You get a free custom domain name with an annual purchase. You've got Squarespace Commerce. I mean, I can go on and on. Look, why don't you try it? You can try it for free. Just go to squarespace.com. Only thing I ask, if you decide you want to buy, and you will, use the MacBreak offer code. That way you get 10% off, and then they know you heard this on MacBreak Weekly. Squarespace, the place to make your website. I'm really loving my Squarespace site. And check my site out, too, for updates as we travel, leolaporte.com. I have a photo portfolio there and everything, and a blog. Squarespace.com, and the offer code MacBreak for 10% off. Now back to MacBreak Weekly.
Thank you, Leo. Important words from the past. I like that he doesn't pretend that he's like in another room here. He's on vacation right now.
It's like an episode of Planetary. It's just amazing, the conundrums he's unleashing.
There could be a vast rip in the space-time continuum if you were to walk in the door right now.
I think
the bleed is everywhere.
I think in Act 4 we'll find out that he actually has been in stasis for 41 years, and we've been using these promos to basically to usurp his power while keeping him helpless.
Interesting. Well, there is one more sponsor in this episode, so people need to stay tuned for that, because that might be the big twist, the big reveal.
Watch and see if his hair parting in the same side every ad.
That's right. That's right. Leo will be back soon. He'll be back, I believe, for next week's MacBreak Weekly. I think he'll even be back this weekend. So he's coming back. He's coming back. Just wait. He'll be tanned and rested and ready.
After 3 weeks in Europe, what's the over/under on the amount of weight he's gained? I'm guessing no less than 3 pounds.
Well, I mean,
he's been doing very good on his diet, but that's all bets are off if you're going to Europe for an entire 3 weeks.
You gotta enjoy yourself. I mean, for Pete's sake.
There you go.
For Pete's sake, you're in Europe.
Every mouthful of kale when you get home will taste that much better, knowing that I paid for this kale by having every cannoli I wanted when I was in Italy.
See, France is going to hurt him, but it's even odds what happens in Russia, because he could just come back going every day, borscht, 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 and then it'll be all different.
Oh, I had borscht in Russia. It wasn't that bad.
We're welcoming a new sponsor this week, the Beet Hut. Yes, with over 400 Beet Hut locations in most major cities.
That's suspicious.
In Russia, borscht beat you.
So a guy writing for a website, this random website called sixcolors.com. That's me. That's my website. I wrote the story.
I was about to say that.
I'm interested in what you guys think about it, which is I love messages. I love what Apple's doing with messages on iOS 10. The idea that they dumped in all of these new features to make it more fun. Chat programs are incredibly popular on mobile. It's like the killer app of mobile. And iMessage was kind of boring. And they know that people like to have fun in their message conversations. So they added all these features in iOS 10. Some of them got added to the Mac, although not very many. The issue I have is that it does feel very much like a bunch of features got backed up in a truck and dumped into the app, and they're kind of all over the place. The blue arrow is a little less clear about whether you're sending, and do you know that you can force touch, or if
Wait, isn't that the shift key? They finally fixed the shift key, right? That's what that blue arrow is.
The 3D touch, and if you don't have 3D touch, you can long press on that arrow, and then you get some effects. But there are also effects on a gray. There's this gray caret icon that you can tap, and you get 3 other icons there. And if you turn your phone sideways, you can write with ink. And there's stuff, and there's apps deep down in there, but you have to tap like 4 or 5 times to get to the Messages App Store. That's my
Scott Forrestal is never opening this app.
Why the call for help sometimes that I feel when I'm using this. So I'm curious what you guys think about messages in general, and if you agree or disagree with me that even though the features are kind of fun and cool, there are a lot of them, and they're all kind of in a jumble. What do you think?
I'll just say that I really, really wish it were multi-platform. That's a complaint I have. I don't fully understand why Apple's why a company's going to be putting that much effort into basically creating a copy of bringing some of the WhatsApp and some of the Snapchat features into their stock app, knowing that one of the reasons why we have Snapchat and WhatsApp is that not all of our friends have the same phone.
Right.
So it's really difficult. I hate the fact that I've got on my own phone, I've got 4 or 5 different chat apps, only because I can't convince everybody to use the same standard. And I'm glad to see an app in which Apple is allowing themselves to have some whimsy and to have a bit of fun. But once again, it's like, are you doing it better than anybody else can? So, I mean, my big problem with messages has always been, will I get the message? That's really all I care about. And
it's like telling time on a smartwatch. It's kind of a key feature.
Exactly. I mean, that was my first big letdown with Apple Watch, was when I was having breakfast with somebody, and there was that kind of detour where they turn off that one road you need to get at if you're gonna get someplace in an orderly fashion. And no joke, it was like a 5-mile drive, but because of this one thing being turned off, it turned into a 30-mile ride. And so, well, no problem. I have my Apple Watch. So during the traffic jam, I simply said, blah 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 blah. Hi, I'm stuck in traffic. I've got a detour. I'll be 20 minutes late. There you go. Thank you, Apple Watch. This is definitely going into the review as a reason why Apple Watch is so great. And then I got there, and my friend was miffed because I'm sorry, you should have texted me. I said, but I used my Apple Watch to message you. And he had an Apple Watch and an iPhone, but Messages decided, see, the last time that he logged in was from his computer in his office. I'll direct this message to the computer in his office. So yeah, that's really all I care about. If you make me a great SMS app that has chat built in that will make sure that no matter what happens, it gets the message, I'll use it, and then I'll use WhatsApp alongside it for the sticker stuff. But that's where the fail is for me. I just don't trust it enough to even on my iPads, even on my iOS devices. I just don't trust it enough to use it.
Yeah, I think there's like three separate issues here, and one is there's absolutely, I think reliability and dependability have gotten way, way better. And I use Hangouts and I use Skype and I use everything that Andy mentioned because I have friends on all those platforms. And I wouldn't say any of them are more or less reliable now than iMessage. All of them will occasionally drop a message. So I think that part is largely fixed. Messaging in general is fragmented. People in different areas, like iMessage is popular in North America, but almost unheard of. WhatsApp is hugely popular in some places. Line is popular. WeChat. I mean, there are fragmentation issues that are going to stop anyone from having a unified messaging system if you have friends in multiple areas or on multiple platforms. And the other two are interesting. One is there is cachet in having an exclusive messaging service is what helped BlackBerry in the early days. If you were on BBM, you were a mover and a shaker, and people aspired to be on BBM, and executives were on PIN, which was even more prestigious than BBM. But at a certain point, you lose the market. WhatsApp eats your lunch, and the entire value of your company is infinitesimal compared to the company that basically cloned your entire messaging strategy and made it multi-platform. So it's an incredibly sharp balancing act that you have to pay a lot of attention to and make the smart choice where, yes, it helps you retain users now. Tomorrow, you're hemorrhaging money. So you got to pay super attention. The third thing is I think Messages was a marquee feature for iOS 10, and for various reasons, it was hard to get to market. And they had to do a lot of things, like they weren't able to get it fully deployed on the Mac. There were some features that were cut from the iOS version and others that maybe didn't get as far along as they should have. And when you look at it, I think that sort of makes sense. You like the management, when you start having multiple sticker packs and multiple apps, it did not get the thinking through it needed. And the way that messages are bound, like it's delightful that you can collaborate. You can stickerate someone completely. You can just splash stickers on somebody, totally hide them out. It's an amazing feeling, but I keep going to emoji to get stickers because they're all just pictures to me. And the organization and all of that, I think Apple needs another year to sort of figure out the coherence behind the features that they threw on the wall this year.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. They focused on deploying these features, and they did. It is, as a Mac user, I'm sad that the Mac has some, but not a lot of those features. I still don't entirely understand. Like, there are two different ways to draw things with your finger. You can do the
digital
touch
is crammed in there.
You can do digital touch. Digital touch is so confusing that it's got an animated sort of guide, and then if you tap on that, it brings up a screen that explains to you how to use digital touch. It's like
they buried it on the watch the same time they bought its iPhone.
Well, that's the really baffling thing is it's like Apple Watch team is being told, look, digital touch, de-emphasize, and then the Messages team is like, we got digital touch now.
I think it's hard.
It is, yeah. It's a tough one, and I do wonder. We were speculating on a podcast I do, Upgrade, that somebody at Apple really loves digital touch because that is the only explanation for why it keeps on kind of getting floated up there.
My understanding is that digital touch, they thought it was going to be a big deal, and that was shown in the prominence that it was given on the Apple Watch. It was given a prime slot on one of only two dedicated hardware buttons, and they were all in on this, and it just did not work out. So cooler heads prevailed and it was moved down. But at the same time, because these development cycles are so long, digital touch was being built for iPhone and iPad. And, they could have canceled it, I guess, but, they didn't cancel it totally in Apple Watch. So it's like, yeah, sure, cram it in there into what was already a really, really, really tough process getting the messages finished in time for WWDC. Apparently, there was a lot of ups and downs involved there as well. And at the end, they just, they had what they could ship. And I think if they could do it over again, they might have done it a different way. And I think they will take the next year, sort of one of those like an iCloud moment.
Yeah, little refinements. Little refinements will happen. I think to Andy's point about competing with some of these other categories, I don't know. This is it's a base platform feature. It's on every iPhone. I feel like this is more about bringing. It's recognizing that people have fun on other platforms with messaging, and that nobody has any fun on iMessage, and that maybe Apple should give them some things that are like what other platforms have, so maybe they could have fun too, even though they're never going to download a second messaging app, because there are a lot of people, I would say a huge number of people, especially in North America, who are not going to download another messaging app. They're just going to use the one that's on their phone. So why not make that more fun? Because clearly people on other platforms are having more fun than they are on iMessage. And it does that. It's just kind of a hodgepodge right now.
Also, both Apple and Google are in the same boat where they realize that people they look at what apps do people spend most of their time using, and more it's going to be the messaging app. So if they want to deliver really great features into the rest of the experience, they have to project it into a messaging app. And so both we're seeing active assistance in both Apple's messaging app and in Google's messaging app. Today's Google event, they really made it. They part of the keynote of the keynote, as it were that if the transition was from centralized computing to personal computing to mobile computing to phones, now to mobile. Now the next step is AI. And so really, if you want to, it's sort of like letting a third party have the messaging app is a lot like letting a third party have your APIs and have your desktop launcher. You really need to have the ability to make people think that the concierge to the entire phone experience is going to be your messaging app. So it's really important that they get that ground back, and they know that they're not going to get it back if it's still if it's still the app you use to tell your mom that everything's fine, college is great, I'll chat with you again next Friday, and you make it more like the one, okay, I already called my mom, now we can get drunk.
Well, I think that's the key point, though. I mean, some of these new features really are cute. Some of them are like your parents trying to do Snapchat, and I don't think they'll age particularly well. But the important thing is that absolutely messaging apps are becoming platforms. They're becoming a layer on top of the base operating system. And when you look at what Line and WeChat specifically have done, and what some like Facebook and Google are moving towards, because we're actually behind the large Asian messaging services. They're huge platforms already with stickers, yes, but huge businesses built into gaming and stickers and entertainment and apps and all these things. And I think the bigger news, like the stickers are fun. I love them, and the effects are cute, sometimes. But it's messaging apps, I think, is what's going to be the huge growth for Apple there.
Yeah, I think you're right. Oh, by the way, while Andy was talking earlier, Rene sent me messages with lasers. So thanks, Rene. I sent you back some balloons with lasers.
I got them.
That's good.
It's so much fun.
Oh yeah. Hey, do you hear the sound, that beeping sound that's happening in the background that I imagined and isn't actually there? That's the sound of trucks backing up, construction trucks, because Apple is building. I have a whole bunch of stories here, and I just want to. I thought this was an interesting confluence of stories. The Verge reports Apple is building a $45 million research center in Beijing to develop new hardware. Apple is building a UK center at the Battersea Power Station, the historic decommissioned Battersea Power Station that's on the Thames. They're moving their UK headquarters to Battersea and taking up a large percentage of the building, not all of it, but a large percentage, and moving all of their London work to Battersea, which is pretty cool. The Danish data center that Apple is using is the largest foreign investment in that country's history. Something very data intensive is happening in the state of Denmark. And let's see, what else? The Regent Street Apple Store in London is making its long-awaited reopening on October 15th. More London news. And even more exciting, perhaps, the lights are on at Campus 2. Now, the Apple spaceship is glowing to life now that we are getting just a few months away from the opening of the new Apple campus. Yes, it doesn't just look like a spaceship. It glows like a spaceship. So I don't know what you guys think about this, other than some of this is just Apple is a big company and they got a lot going on. And some of it is Apple maybe being more open to the fact that they've got a lot of people around the world working at Apple, where in the early days of Steve Jobs, the whole watchword was everything happens in Cupertino. That's really doesn't seem to be the case anymore.
Not for a while. I mean, they famously had like voice offices in Boston, and they've iWork for iPad was done in Vancouver, and they have a bunch of offices all around.
They got a big Ottawa office, I know, big Ottawa office doing some special project stuff too. So they're in Canada and obviously London. So. But you mentioned James Thompson earlier, our friend James Thompson. That was a famous story where he was recalled to the mothership and refused to go in the end because they wanted everybody working on OS X to be in Cupertino, and Apple is too big to do that. There's too much.
Are you telling me the engineer working on the Finder is in bleeping Ireland?
Actual Steve Jobs quote. He pulled it off. There's a movie to be made. It's almost like A Weekend at Bernie's, except it involves an Irish software engineer or a Scottish software engineer in Ireland pretending to be in Cupertino when he's actually not. That would be a pretty zany. Maybe there's an episode of like a Halt and Catch Fire that could do something like that.
Oh, that'd be great. Halt and Catch Fire.
Yeah. Exactly. I don't know. Apple's a big company, and sometimes I think those of us who've been covering it for a long time forget just what its global reach is and the size of its operations all over the world. But
China is hugely important. Like we love to talk about Amazon in especially in America because it's a huge story there. But Amazon, for example, in China is almost non-existent because they already have big retailers and big online presences and their own companies. And to compete there is really hard. We've seen the trouble that Google's had, and Apple hasn't had the easiest time lately either. And you can paint a picture where the more business Apple does, like when they invest in Chinese companies and they build plants there, that's them also investing in their future of being allowed to sell into that market.
I know my friends in London are very excited about the Regent Street store opening up. It's going to be similar, I think, to the store that they reopened at Union Square in San Francisco, where it's got the sort of new, I guess it's the Angela Arendt era Apple store look, but it's opening on October 15th, and that is the go-to flagship London store, and it's finally going to get its reopening because our mutual friend Mike Hurley is frustrated that Regent Street hasn't been open. You got to go to Regent Street, so it's opening. The new Apple retail.
It was the first Apple store in Europe, so it's a significant thing. I think we've both been to that store, haven't we?
I haven't.
I have not. No, just you and you and Mike Hurley. Only the well-bearded.
I was actually the first person to speak on the stage in the theater at the Regent Street. I happened to be in town during the opening, and so I just I booked the gig for some reason because I had a book to sell. And yeah, I mean I guess it does show you the difference between Apple's relationship with those stores when they first started opening them to today, where it's no longer necessarily a theater space. It really is a place for people to wait while they have their Genius Bar appointments. So and also they think they also realize that this is a place where once or twice a year there's going to be a big line of people. Once or twice a year they're going to be local press are going to have their cameras there to do the hey and what's your name and how long have you been waiting in line for the new iPhone 8? So
do you want the half-pint iPhone or the full-pint iPhone? Comes in pints.
Yeah, you got to have the metric phones over there. That's one of the confusing things about the rest of the world to us Americans is the metric phones. In Canada, you got the metric phones too.
Liberia is on your side, Jason.
Yeah, that's right. Thank goodness for that. So,
the metric phone is that you double it and add 30, so it's the iPhone 44.
Yeah, well, I like to lay 1,000 iPhones end to end to get a kilo iPhone. That's what I prefer. Personally. So earlier today, as we record this, Google did an event which we're not talking about because this is not a Google show. There are wonderful Android-related podcasts available, including from Twit, that you should check out. And he also co-hosts one on Relay FM that you could check out. But so I didn't even want to bring it up, but I want to bring it up for one reason, which is as a news angle, Google announced the impending, they already mentioned it, but they announced the impending arrival of Google Home, which is their equivalent of the Amazon Echo. It is a voice-controlled canister that sits somewhere, a flower pot basically, that sits in your house, and it gives voice control and a speaker to kind of the air in your living room, which is a pretty cool idea. I love my Amazon Echo for the same reason. It's very different from having a phone or a tablet that I can activate, or my watch and activate and trigger Siri, because it is in the house. It's available to everyone. Everyone can hear it. Everyone can talk to it, and then it can put out music. So I mentioned the Google Home because there is a question here, which is, I've written about it a couple of times, which is, where's Apple? And this week, my colleague Dan Morin wrote on Macworld about how next year Apple should make what he and I have been calling the Siri Speaker. And I've been wondering about that too, is Apple's pushing Siri forward on a bunch of fronts, but I feel like one of the things that Apple needs to do is get Siri out of our phones and watches and into the air of our houses so that we can all talk to it and listen to it. What do you guys think about the idea of making an Amazon Echo or Google Home-like thing powered by Siri?
They have prototypes that are both include an Apple TV, a standalone speaker thing, I think something that looks like an Airport Extreme, but more modern. And one of the big questions with Apple is they don't always do things just because they can, and they absolutely have the technology to push these things out. But they have this huge philosophical question that I think they're trying to answer, and that is, Siri right now is a personal assistant, and how do you make it a multi-personal assistant? And what I mean by that is, if you look at the implementation of Siri on the Apple TV, for example, it is far smaller than it is is on the iPhone, because with the iPhone you can say, read my text messages, read my email, what's my calendar, what's my appointment, and Apple believes that that's usually private information that should be accessible only to the person who owns that information. And when you move that to an environment where you could have other family members, you could have roommates, you could be in a dorm, you could be in sort of a public
roommates.
facility.
They're the worst.
Yeah. No, but I mean, like if I say read my text messages and I get Andy's text messages, that's a problem. I mean, like it's a problem for both of us sometimes. And they have to figure out a way of making Siri a multi-personal. And you see this with a lot of things. Like Siri is limited still for doorknobs and garage doors because you have to authenticate in order to open those, because they don't want you to drop your Apple TV remote and somebody open your door and let people inside without your permission. And that might seem silly, but they really do have this sort of security and privacy first angle. If they didn't care about that, I think we would have that product on the market. But I think it's the same reason why like you don't see AirPods immediately on the Apple TV. They're not sure what their multi-person philosophy is yet. And once they nail that, once Siri can either detect voices or it detects your Apple Watch or it does something, then they'll figure out, well, we'll make one that doesn't suck simply because it'll have access to all your information, but it'll know it's you before it gives it to you.
Andy, what do you think?
Yeah, that would be a very Apple way to do it. That we don't want. We've got our priorities, and we're not going to ship something until we figured out how to make this work towards the way that we think such a device should do. But that's also one of, I think, Apple's biggest failings, because the Amazon Echo didn't address those problems, but it's wonderful. It works great. I bought I have the one that was sent as a press review unit, and then I wound up buying some because I can't use this anymore because it's a review unit, and I just love it so much. And all these other features that they're not perfect and they didn't solve every problem, but at least they got it out there. And I don't think the world really knew that there was this gap in the standard technology loadout of every house until Amazon did something kind of crazy and put these things in. And now Google has seen how well those devices have done. They quickly realized that, well, we know more about our customers than anybody else who interacts with our customers. We could do something that's very much like this, and it would be even better, given that they're trying to make the Google Assistant into as important a product for Google as the iPhone is to Apple. And that too is not going to have a flawless execution, but it's a $129 device you can buy today, as opposed to a device that we all agree it makes sense for Apple to make, but Apple doesn't comment on unannounced products. I think that Apple does sometimes release a product when they don't know what it should be yet, namely the Apple Watch. But I really think that they should have more low stakes things like this. It's such a cool thing. The number of times I've sold an Amazon, I keep wanting to call it my Alexa when it is the Amazon Echo. That's how important it is. But the number of times that I'm leaving to go out to dinner or something with somebody, and we're meeting up at my house, and I'm just, as a casual thing, I'm saying, "Hey, Alexandria, what's the weather right now?" And without even looking, because I'm looking for either the light jacket or the heavy jacket, what did it just do? Oh, well, it's just the thing. It's just Alexa. How does it work? It's like, okay. And then I'm afraid of what's going to happen when I turn off the lights in the house by saying, okay, I'm leaving now. And God dang it, we're going to miss the movie because I'm going to do another 20-minute demo of this thing. So it's clearly something that works great. Why doesn't Apple make one? I hope it's because they feel as though they've got their plate full already and they don't want to take on more than they can effectively communicate and support and market. I hope it's not because we are not going to make this until we've decided it's the best one of these that's ever been made.
I think Rene makes a really good point about the fact that so much of what Apple does is with Siri is personalized. I think another issue is that Siri resides on devices with screens. And if you've ever used Siri, you've realized that a lot of times in most modes of Siri, it's going to frequently kick you to things that are on the screen and say, I looked this thing up for you. Here it is. And on something like the Amazon Echo, you can't do that. You can't punt and send it to the screen. And so it's a different Siri experience that they would need. At the same time, with the existence of Apple Music and iTunes Match, the fact that you've got so much of a music infrastructure that Apple already has, and the fact that Siri already does exist, even if you were to take off some of the personalization of it, I feel like that would be a great product just as an Apple Music product, plus some other stuff thrown in. It's certainly not an easy product to build, and I don't think anybody's saying that, but I think it's intriguing to imagine what an Apple product would be that was like an Amazon Echo or like a Google Home, but with a little bit of an Apple spin on it. And I hope they play, because I love that feature. Like Andy was saying, I love that Amazon Echo. It is a fun product. Is it the best speaker in my house? Not even close. Is it the best personal voice assistant in my house? Probably not. But the fact that it's always there and everybody in my family can use it, that's compelling. And I'm interested in what Google will do with the Google Home, and I'm very interested in the idea that maybe Apple could do its take on that, and it would be better integrated with the rest of my life that I keep in Apple stuff, because I am an Apple Music subscriber. I would like to say, hey, lady, play this song, and I can't do that with Alexa because the Amazon Music library doesn't have the stuff that's in Apple Music for me.
To get a cheap plugin, the next and maybe final episode of Debug, it has Leah Napolitana on it, and she was experience lead for Siri on CarPlay and on Apple TV. And she explains just that, like how when you have a screen in front of you, what sort of visual affordances you have, and when you don't have a screen, like on CarPlay, you can't stare at it for a long time. Or Apple TV, the context is so different than a phone. So if they know you're looking at a screen, they give you much less information out loud than they would if they don't think you're looking at a screen, like in a car, and then they explain more. And it's a whole fascinating area of user experience on its own.
Yeah, and also points out your experience with Alexa and music, that it's also a missed opportunity because these devices kind of convince people to buy more services. What got me to finally spend $20 or $25 a year to get like unlimited music storage on my Amazon account was knowing that I could just be doing the dishes and then just simply call out and ask Alexa, play some Beatles for me.
Me too.
And that's what got me to say, okay, you know what? It's worth 2 nights of uploading and $25 a year to keep my entire music library synced to this thing. So that's another bit of opportunity that Apple might be missing out on the longer they wait.
Yeah, I agree. Well, we have a little more show left to go. We're going to do our picks. It's been a big show, lots of stuff going on. But before we do that, it's time for the big plot twist, maybe, which is this other message in a bottle cast to us, and it just washed up on the shore from Leo Laporte. Leo?
More of MacBreak Weekly coming up in just a bit, but I want to tell you I'm missing my I can tell right now I'm on vacation. I know I'm going on a very nice boat and everything, but I'm going to be missing my Casper mattress. I love my Casper mattress. Casper is reinventing the mattress business. They are an online retailer, but they make the mattresses. So there's no markup. There's no middleman. They sell direct to you premium mattresses for a fraction of the cost. No more resellers, no more showrooms. And I know, wait, you're saying, but how do I know if I like it? Well, this is, and I've mentioned this before, I know you know, the beauty part is you don't have to know you like it. Order a Casper. The prices start at $500 for a twin. Get your Casper mattress. If you want, keep your old mattress. Just put it aside and sleep on it. You have 100 nights. If at any time in the 100 nights you say, well, that was nice, but I like my old mattress, or whatever, say, call them. They will come and get it. They will refund every penny. Will have cost you nothing. It is, but you're going to love it. It's breathable, which is important. Sleeping cool is really important. You don't want to be sweaty. And it's a very nice, breathable design. It matches, it's because, Lisa and I, she likes a cushy mattress. I like a firm mattress, but we get both with our Casper mattress. It's got firm support, and then but it also contours your body on top. It's kind of amazing. You got springy latex foam, supportive memory foam, and the combination. They're brilliant. They've won the awards because, like the 2016 Business Intelligence Group Innovation Award. They are just great. Don't lie in a bed in a showroom. That's not going to tell you whether you like a mattress. Get a Casper. Engineered to meet the Goldilocks standard. Not too hard, not too soft, but just right. Casper mattresses, by the way, they uphold the highest environmental production standards. They're made in the USA. They come in a very surprisingly compact box, which makes it easy to move in. And you get free shipping and returns, should you want them, in the U.S. and Canada. By the way, you get an additional $50 towards a mattress purchase just because you're listening at Casper.com/MacBreak. Use the promo code MacBreak. Terms and conditions apply. That's Casper.com/MacBreak for $50 off your new Casper. You're going to love it. Now back to MacBreak Weekly.
It was Casper all along. That's your plot twist. It was Casper all along.
It's a cue. We're supposed to be awake now. Awaken, everybody. Awaken, sheep. Rise against the machine.
All right, it's time for the picks of the week. I will go first as your sub-host. I will go first. I'm convinced that I've talked about this app before, but I'm going to talk about it again because it's great, especially if you use a Mac and you tether to a cellular device a lot, which a lot of people do. It's called Trip Mode. It costs $8. You can get it at tripmode.ch. And what does it do? It lets you decide what apps and processes on your Mac use data and which ones do not. See, unfortunately, unlike your iPhone, where the apps can actually behave differently when they're on a cell network and a Wi-Fi network, your Mac just thinks it's on a Wi-Fi network all the time, or Ethernet, right? It doesn't know that you're tethered to a cell network. Well, sometimes it does, but it doesn't care, I guess is what I'm saying. It doesn't care. And so it will kill your cell connection and use all your bandwidth doing an online backup, let's say, because it doesn't understand that it really ought not to be using data. So with Trip Mode, you turn it on, you choose the apps that you want to have access to the network, and uncheck the apps that you don't. It'll also warn you if an app tries to use data so that you can go in there and choose whether to let it have data or not. I use it actually all the time for podcasting because when I'm podcasting, I want to use as little network as possible so that my audio and video can get through, but I still want access to the internet. But it is perfect if you're somewhere where you have a very limited amount. It's good for hotels too, not just tethering, but hotels where you've got like a very small amount of bandwidth that you can really get out the door, and you don't want that online backup firing. You don't want that iCloud Drive sync happening. You don't want Dropbox triggering when you're trying to do something else. So Trip Mode, $8. It's cross-platform. You can actually buy for a little bit more, get it for Mac and Windows, and I love it a lot. So if you are a person in one of those circumstances, it is great to let you manage your own data. I wish Apple would add some of this to macOS in the future, some intelligence about when you're on a certain kind of network, but alas, I think it is not to be. So in the meantime, we will use Trip Mode. Andy, what's your pick?
My pick is a book I pre-ordered a long time ago, and it finally came this week. It is Adobe. It's a Classroom in a Box from Adobe. It's the Lightroom CC and Photoshop CC for photographers, and written by really great trainer Lisa Snyder. She's a friend of mine. I've known her for a long time. But I was so excited about this book that I didn't even do hey, Lisa, maybe I'd like to review this sometime. So could you put me on the comp list? No, I just went right on Amazon and pre-ordered it. And I'll tell you why, because I'm a photography fan. I'm an amateur, so I'm no stranger to Lightroom and Photoshop CC. But the problem is that I'm sort of in the same boat as a rank beginner because I have never taken classes. So every technique that I use is something I figured out for myself, as opposed to the right way or the better way of doing things. And every time that I look through the menus of Photoshop and Lightroom, I will find a feature that, so I could have done that in 8 minutes instead of spending 2 days editing it using my 1998 Photoshop skills. And it's a beautiful book. Like I said, Lisa is an educator. She just teaches classes, and she's been writing books pretty much forever. So she knows how to teach stuff to people who don't necessarily know what they're doing. And it's beautifully illustrated. Every page is in color, and it really will take you step by step by step, not in like academic sort of language, saying a Gaussian blur uses the following algorithm. It's here's a picture. I think we want to fix it by doing this. We can do that easily by using edge detection, or we can use it better with a smart fill. As a classroom in a book, they're not dirt cheap. The cover price of this is $59.99, but it really is a classroom in a book. It means it's not a cheap book that's printed on bad paper with black and white illustrations with that one little white strip of real colored photos in the middle, written by somebody for whom this is the third book they're writing this month on such disparate topics as microwave cooking, feng shui, and making the most of your XML-based database. This is an expert who does nothing but talk about Photoshop, and it arrived 3 days ago, and already I've been like, I was going to edit these 3 or 4 pictures I took over the weekend, but I want to read this chapter before I do it first. So as far as I'm concerned, it's already paid for itself. So this is very, very high recommendation. Again, I realize that $60 isn't cheap, but think of it in terms of going and taking a structured class. Only you can basically do this. You can do this on the plane. You can do this on the train. Keep it next to your desk. Keep it wherever you do your photo editing. I guarantee you it will just pay for itself in the amount of time it saves you and the amount of pleasure it gives you in being able to take the picture that you actually took and make it look like what you had in your head when you took that picture. So that's what I got.
I would love to read the microwave cooking book by Lisa Snyder, though. So if she wants to branch out,
it would involve it would still involve kickboxing.
Yeah, I'm sure it would, and feng shui too. Why not? Renee, what's your pick?
I have 2 picks, but first, breaking, Apple has released a new iOS beta, iOS 10.1 beta 2, and apparently it fixes things like reduced motion for message effects and lets you replay message effects and all sorts of things like that. So if you're on the beta track, run and go check it out. No new portrait mode features, but some things I think will make some people happy. My 2 picks, the first one, Jason mentioned it earlier, but I had very little to do with this, but I'm delighted with how it turned out. So there is an iMore Show sticker pack, so you can find all the hosts of the iMore Show, from Micah Sargent to Georgia Dow, Serenity Caldwell, Lori Gill, all of them in sticker form. We tried to pick some of the catchphrases that we are mocked the most for, and because stickers are delightful, you can now throw a Serenity true facts on anything that you want to put it on, or like an animal, or sort of anything that you find delightful at the moment. I really enjoy it, and we have been sticker obliterating people with them. So your mileage may vary. Check them out, though, if you haven't. It's free, so you have nothing to lose but your time and maybe your sanity. The second pick is a wonderful article Micah Sargent, the aforementioned Micah Sargent, put together on Apple lugs. Now, I didn't link to a specific product because it really depends on which watch you have, what color it is, and what size it has. And he went through and put together a list of all the different lugs. And what it is Apple has a lot of bands, and third parties have a lot of bands that just ship with stainless steel lugs. And some people are okay with that. Other people get really upset because they have a space gray or a space black or a rose gold or a gold watch, and it just doesn't match. And they can never unsee that. It's like a panda look or something, and it really bothers them. So with this, you can just go and pick a separate set of lugs, ones that match the casing style of the Apple Watch that you have. It comes with the Torx screws that you need, so you just unscrew the lugs on your favorite band, you screw them into the new lug, and you pop it onto your watch, and you have blissfully coordinated Apple Watch Serenity in your future. And he tried it with a bunch of different ones and really liked the results. And I'm ordering and spending my entire weekend, I think, fixing all my Apple Watch bands. So if you're into Apple Watch, if you have a few bands like I do, you might be super interested in this.
That's the understatement of the week right there. A few bands. Renee's got a few bands.
Imelda Marcos had a few shoes too.
I have the leather. Band. It's got the stainless steel lugs, and I've got a space gray watch, and it doesn't bother me too much. But I have friends who look at it and they're like, "That's like clown pants, there, man."
They think you're an animal.
That's right. Exactly right. You can't do that. Well, I think we've reached the end. Did I do okay? Did I ruin the show, guys, or was it okay?
It was fantabulous.
Okay, good. Good. Andy?
You landed the plane on the water. You were and you will be played by a very, very likable Hollywood A-list actor.
It wasn't meant to be a water landing, or have I landed in the wrong place? That's terrible. The pontoon's out? Did we landed okay? Good. All right. Well, Leo is going to be back next week, and I'm sure everybody out there will be happy to welcome him back after his trip to Europe. I'm very happy to Leo and everybody at Twit for letting me sit in. And you can reach me at sixcolors.com, where I write about Apple stuff all the time, and I write weekly at macworld.com. I podcast at theincomparable.com and relay.fm. Andy Ihnatko, thank you for being here. You are obviously at suntimes.com, cwob.com. Everybody, that means the colossal waste of bandwidth. I was there. I was the webmaster for the original version of the colossal waste of bandwidth. Where else can we find you, Andy?
As I'm fond of saying whenever I bring up the length of our friendship, it was Jason who told me how to boldface text in HTML.
That's true.
That's going back quite a bit.
It's a little bit.
Yeah, again, the price of admission to the Andy Ihnatko online fun ride is spell my last name, cwob.com, which is how we pronounce it in the old Gaelic. It also redirects to ihnatko.com, which is the same site, and I'm also Ihnatko on Twitter and Instagram.
Fabulous. Rene Ritchie from iMore and so many more things. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Jason. I look forward to seeing you at OOL in Ireland soon.
Yes, we are going to be in Ireland. That's going to be great. Do you have anything else to plug? I mean, you plugged the sticker pack already. I feel like that's a must download for everybody.
I hope so. Apple Talk, last week we had Ben Baharin from Creative Strategies on to talk about where the missing Macs are. This week we have Liz Plosser from Self Magazine talking about the fitness benefits of the Apple Watch. So if you like listening to single-focused Apple-centric podcasts, we have an additional one for your playlist.
Awesome. All right, that's it. Leo's back next week. But until then, I just want to remind you, get back to work. Break time is over. See you, everybody.